This episode is sponsored by the Pisgah Coaching Institute, founded by IFS-trained master coach Brian Jadon, who has been a pioneer in the integration of IFS and coaching for more than 2 decades. You can work with an IFS-informed coach who personally trained with Brian to clarify and live into a vision of any kind. Check out PCI's affiliate coaching program at pisgahcoaching.com. That is PISGAH coaching.com. Welcome to Season 6 of the One Inside an Internal Family Systems podcast. I'm Tammy Sollenberger, author of The One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about their inner world and who have a desire to connect to that authentic self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I am so excited to bring back to the podcast my friend Michelle Glass. Michelle is a certified level 3 IFS practitioner, Oregon licensed psilocybin facilitator, and alternative counselor who has 20 years of IFS experience. She is the author of this amazing book, Daily Parts Meditation Practice, a journey of embodied integration for clients and therapists. Welcome back to the podcast, Michelle.
Thank you, Tammy. It's so nice to be back. It's been a while and I love your podcast. So this is going to be fun.
I'm excited. So why don't we start where we always start, which is where you are in the world and what you see if you look out your nearest window.
I'm in Eugene, Oregon. And as I look out my window, I see a big rhododendron tree that's got dead flowers. And gray sky. We finally have some cool weather. We've had unseasonably warm weather, even for October. So it's good to see some clouds and moisture out there.
So I have to brag because when I look out my window, which I almost took a picture of this and sent it to you earlier today, but I was too busy, of course. But out my window is golden trees. I mean, they're pop. We're peak fall season, and it looks like it's just incredible. The sun is shining on these trees and they're all yellow and there's some orange kind of popping in. I'll send you a picture later, but it's very beautiful. So Michelle was on the podcast early, like maybe 5 years ago. And I met Michelle. I have to tell everybody this, that I think I just put in Google, like daily meditation and IFS, and your book came up. And so I bought your book, and to me, you were famous. So I bought your book and then I joined their Facebook group. You have a couple Facebook groups. And then you sent me a Facebook message that said like, hey, you might want to be on this group. And I was like, oh my gosh, this person just sent me this Facebook message. I can't believe it. And then yada, yada, yada. I went to the conference in Rhode Island, I guess, and was like a total weirdo and was like, saw you. I think you walked by and I don't know, probably introduced myself. And then I went to your workshop and now we're friends. And so Michelle's passion right now is psychedelic-assisted therapy, and you've done so much work to be licensed or whatever you have to do, jump through all these hoops, which you can tell people about. And so you and I were just chatting and you said something about IFS is also a non-ordinary state. And I was like, okay, you need to come on the podcast and talk about that because I don't know what that means and I want to know more. And so it really lined up with my wanting to talk to you about that. And then Derek's book's coming out soon. And Michelle and I also shared, we were one of the few people that knew that Derek was going to pass away. And I was so incredibly grateful because I had this secret that I couldn't tell anybody. And you reached out to me. And so I was so thankful that you had reached out to me. And then you even reached out to me on the day that he passed away. I remember I was on a plane and just crying and texting with you. So anyways, I think my parts just needed to say all of that. So thank you for letting me say all of that.
Yeah. Well, it's I think a lot of synchronicity and confluence with this topic and timing. But yeah, holding that in confidence for Derek was an honor. And then I knew on the day he passed, I knew you knew, but I didn't know that you knew I knew. So I was like, I think Derek's going to be okay with me contacting Tammy. So
yeah, I was so grateful that you did. I have parts that were like I mean, I couldn't tell. I think I ended up telling my mom, and I think I told Derek that I told her because I was like, I have parts that are just so black and white that like you can't tell anybody, but it was so hard to hold that. And so I told my mom, and she was wonderful about it. So yeah, I mean, I was at a Enneagram and IFS retreat. None of these people knew Derek, and I still didn't say it. I mean, I just was like, nope, you don't tell anybody. So it didn't, I didn't tell anybody. Okay, so let's start with this idea that what is a non-ordinary state, and how is IFS and psychedelics connected with this idea of providing a non-ordinary state?
Yeah, so a non-ordinary state is really when we're just in a different mindset than we usually are, right? We're not in our typical function or functionality, right? And if we look at just IFS in particular, when we invite clients to go in, or when we're doing that with ourselves and we're unblending, we are naturally becoming into a different state of our being, right?
It does. How I hear it is I'm in a state right now of just awareness of you, and we're talking, and I have parts that are super excited and I'm trying to calm down a little bit. And so for me to unblend from these parts, I go inside, and that I'm immediately in a different state, a non-ordinary state, because I'm inside and I'm connecting with what's happening in my inner world. So my inner world is a different state.
True. And we can still be inside and blended with some parts, right? So I guess when I teach the different courses I teach, I remind people about the continuum of self and parts. So the more we unblend, and the more we're in much more self energy, the more non-ordinary that is for regular day-to-day life. Yeah, we tap into this inner world that's not only deeply personal and connected to our own systems, but we can then connect to our guides and ancestors and other worldly places, right?
And would you say that it takes us deeper into non-ordinary states? Like there's sort of, yeah, the more we like, if I'm unblending from my parts, I guess this doesn't really matter, but I'm just thinking of like maybe levels. I don't know why, but like I'm in sort of this kind of maybe more narrow level of non-ordinary, and then I can kind of deepen into more levels of non-ordinary.
Yeah, I guess that maybe speaks to the continuum, right? Right. The further to the right side of where self energy is, if parts are on the left and self is on right. The more we deepen in and unblend, it becomes, to me, it feels not only deeper, but more vast and wider. It can really encompass a lot more.
So an ordinary state is sort of just my awareness of kind of what's happening right now, like my awareness of the world and the trees and you and my microphone, or sort of this is sort of the ordinary consciousness, ordinary awareness.
Mm-hmm. Right. I would think more externally focused, maybe. And depending on which of your probably managers are blending in the moment, you have more of a particular lens or things you look at and think about.
I love that. And I think of the Enneagram, which I know you and I have talked a tiny bit about, that in Enneagram, we all have, every type has a focus of attention. So as a 3, which you and I are both 3s on the Enneagram, we are focused on task and goals. So that's sort of our parts can focus on task and goals, and that could be our external focus. Yeah, and that could then feel like more of an ordinary state, that focus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to me. How about for you?
It does to me too. I'm like talking it out loud, like, okay.
Yeah.
So then psychedelics also provide a path into this non-ordinary state. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
I think what started this conversation for us, shall we name the place we do on
Sure.
Marco?
Yeah.
Anyone uses Marco, we leave like these, video messages back and forth. I had just finished, I think, one of my comprehensive IFS intros for psychedelic guides. And I mentioned to you how fun and rewarding it is when I do my first couple demos of this course And these are folks who are new to IFS. They do their demo and they come out and they go, wow, that felt just like a trip. Like I felt like I just had a mushroom trip.
That's exactly right. And that's what I was like, wait, what?
Right. Because what we're doing in IFS, right, is inviting one to go inside and become aware of our parts, and then inviting those parts to separate. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, likely having a focus part. And that in itself is what most psychedelics can do. And I will say, I'm going to stress can do, because it's really important to get permission from our protectors. So if we're ready and we've done a lot of good prep, and our protectors say, okay, I'm ready for this journey, we take maybe psilocybin or ketamine or something, and those protectors relax and unblend to then have this deeper internal focus and allow for what needs to be processed.
So part of me is like, I know the answer to this, but I feel like it just needs to be asked. Why then do we need the medicine? Like if IFS can provide that, why do we need the medicine?
Yeah, well, I don't think we do need the medicine. It can be helpful. Some people want to have that experience. And so that would be one reason for folks to do it. And sometimes there are parts that just have a harder time separating. And if someone wants to have a journey to get maybe more in touch with some exiles or further down their path of healing, the psychedelics, again, with permission of the protectors, can help just facilitate that a little bit easier. Yeah. So I wouldn't say folks need it, but
folks don't need it, but it is a facilitator to help with unblending and help with getting to some of those hard to reach exiles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like the word that you used, facilitator. Sometimes in the psychedelic world, we use the term, it's a key. It's a key to unlock the door. It doesn't open the door, but it's a key. And if our protectors allow that to turn, then we can enter. So it's a beautiful tool when, for me personally, I'm very passionate about the combination of IFS and psychedelics. So when we really work with the protectors up front, it's just a beautiful match. So the capacity to go inside is much greater. And then on the back end, integrating all of that through an IFS lens is a beautiful process too.
Have you found that, because sometimes you can do your IFS work and do an unburdening, and then either it doesn't stick or our parts come in because we don't do our daily meditation practice with our parts. And so I'm wondering if there's lots of reasons why it doesn't stick, which I'm putting in quotes. Right. Do you find that it sticks, or it lasts, or there's more, the unburdening experience lasts longer when it's done with psychedelics? Can I say it that way?
I think the key is still what you said at the beginning of that checking in with parts. I recently did a IFS Canada teaching, and one of our participants, after I went through the slides, realized why her psychedelic journey didn't last, the healing from that, because she didn't check in with her parts afterwards. And I said, I don't think anything's lost. I think you can go right back there and make some repairs and maybe do a little tweakings, whatever you need to do, and it'll be there. So there is a period of time after psychedelics where we do feel much more open. If our protectors haven't backlashed and said, we didn't give permission for this, but if it was all, okay consent, with the system, consent, right? Then there's this, depending on the psychedelic, a week or 2 or 3, sometimes longer, of kind of a honeymoon phase of like everything feels really good. from an IFS perspective for me, that's the protectors have relaxed. Maybe they're in their new roles. The exiles feeling good. Hopefully people are doing their parts check-ins, and it just feels more harmonious and lovely. So if we continue checking in with our parts, we can continue to have more gains with that, I think.
I love that. So it sounds like no matter how we enter this non-ordinary state, whether it's with medicine or whether it's with, going inside and doing our parts work, that checking in with our parts on a daily basis, or just that is what we need to do, whether it's with however we do that. My guess is, because I can feel that way after, an IFS therapy session, but I don't think I feel it as intense or sort of, right, like there's more self energy, there's more me here. And then I'm just like a nicer, more lovely person, for 24 hours. And so that's the time that's like, right, if I could continue checking in with those parts that I worked on and unburdened and just sending them lots of love and just being with them, then that would have more of a lasting impact.
Right. And, psychedelics have the capacity again to open up a lot of our self energy, right? And there is that kind of window of time afterwards where we do feel much more self-led or in more self-energy than we normally would. Yeah. And so that connection with our parts, self has that inclination towards connection. So we're checking in and being with all of that.
I love that. Like self wants to connect. It has an inclination towards connection. Like I love that's actually kind of like my natural state. Like my natural state is to want to be connected to my system.
That's right.
It's beautiful. So why is IFS? You and I both obviously are fans of IFS. So why is IFS the best model for psychedelic-assisted therapy?
I think I would love to just read some points from a slide I give in all my workshops. And so I would like listeners to bear in mind utilizing IFS in both prep, the journey, and integration. It really has just a natural affinity and utility, I guess. So I say that IFS provides safety at every step. And so for me, that means, self as the grounding agent as we go into these journeys in prep, journey, and integration to bring healing, right? Self energy has that healing capacity. And within psychedelic work, and in just IFS, right, it's essential that the guide, the therapist, the practitioner is in self energy. So when the therapist, guide, practitioner, and the client are in self energy, that's a step of safety. And in the medicine world, self is akin to what they call the inner healing intelligence. And so that's one piece of safety. The other one is, of course, when the therapist or the guide, in this case, in the journey work, is self-led, that there's less possibility of re-traumatization. And I liken that to harm reduction. It's part of why I do my courses. I want to bring much more self-energy into the space with the guides. And then most importantly, it's consent-based, right? At every step. We're never bypassing our protectors. So I teach folks in the medicine space that if we're hearing or seeing any red flags, we need to pause. We want to hear at least, I'm curious. Yeah, I'll give it a try. But if we hear, nope, I really don't want to do this from any part, we want to slow down and listen to that. So that provides safety. And IFS provides a roadmap for the psychedelic space. So when we know the distinct roles of our protectors versus exiles, we know where we're on the path, where we're going, and how to do so safely. So if guides in particular are IFS-informed or trained, they know what's happening with the client. They can work with the protective system or the exiles. And then I say that, IFS provides for natural healing. So It can provide that transformation of the wounds of our exiles, the burdens, and the shifting of roles of protectors. Of course, it provides that continuation of self-depart relationships along the process and then into the future. And this is more related to psychedelics specifically, but parts work emerges spontaneously in about 80% of psychedelic journeys. So it's there. And so if we can use IFS with that, and it's just like, putting a glove on a hand, it's like, okay, we're working in the same arena.
Amazing. Working in the same arena, and IFS gives us, like you said so beautifully, gives us the roadmap of how to do it safely and with boundaries and love, with self-energy. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And I know that Dick has been wanting to have IFS as the roadmap or the map for psychedelics. And I think that it's just inherent. We're seeing that. So, yeah.
I mean, it's amazing, right? If what happens is parts just come up and people start speaking for their parts or talking about their parts, and IFS is like, ooh, like hand raise. We know what to do with that. Like, it's amazing. Like, we have already done that. We already know what to do with this.
Right. And I think I think IFS is different than just quote parts work, because parts work can just be like, okay, we can just acknowledge these parts, but maybe folks who aren't trained in IFS but know some parts work maybe don't know where to go with it.
I 100% agree. And I think the other thing that comes up for me when I think about the term parts work is how me too, can be so focused on parts that I forget that I'm here too, right? The self is here too, that I'm a self, you're a self, that self is there, self is the healing agent. And you said something so beautiful. Self is the grounding agent, there it is, to accompany parts and to bring healing both for the client and the therapist or the guide. It's like both of us are working with our systems, our parts and our self. We're both having that experience.
That's right. And I think, when we go back to the non-ordinary state conversation earlier, when an IFS therapist or practitioner or IFS psychedelic guide has had their own really deep IFS work, they know that terrain inside, right? And so they can step into their self-energy, their parts can relax back. So during a psychedelic journey, they're in their self-energy, hopefully, in a non-ordinary state, along with their client who is also doing that.
And I think as a practitioner / therapist guide, that's why we talk about how we don't get burned out, how it feels like, a day can feel like a day of meditation when we're with our clients, because I'm also in my non-ordinary state. I am the most... some days I'm like, the most self-energy I felt today is sitting at my desk. That's the most self-energy that I felt all day today. Because that's, you're giving me a different way of thinking of it. It's like, right, like I enter this non-ordinary state and there's a part of me that's like, it shouldn't be the only time. I just heard that. It shouldn't be the only time. Yep, you're right. It shouldn't be the only time, but sometimes it is.
Yeah. It's a beautiful place to be in. And I guess I'll go back to saying that with psychedelics, it can, with the protector's permission, can really deepen and widen that non-ordinary state, right? So it becomes much more vast.
Yeah, that I feel like is sort of that's what I'm really hearing is the continuum is wider, vaster. You get there faster. There's more self. There's sort of this experience of self that we might not be able to tap into without the medicine.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not just I can get to my exiles faster or my protectors soften quicker, faster. It's that I can feel more of me. There's more me in the room, which makes sense. If there's more me, then my protectors will step back because there's more of me here.
Right.
Okay.
It's a, what is that called? A nice feedback loop of when that happens. It's like, okay, I can relax even more. Yeah.
I love it. I feel like this episode is me saying like, oh, is it this? Is it this? Okay, is it this?
And how are you doing? Are you feeling like you're finding the path, or are you still?
No, I feel like, I mean, Michelle, it's so funny. I feel like and maybe you're like the third or fourth person on that has talked about psychedelics. And so now I'm like, because I haven't done it yet, as people will know, clearly I'm like, oh, what happens? What's going on? So it's like everyone around me, so many people are doing it and talking about it. And I'm still like, what? Huh? That's my parts. But yeah, so it feels like I'm taking it in and it's making more sense to me. And I trust you so much. So that feels good.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So speaking of trusting you, let's talk about Derek.
Okay.
So Derek Scott, for people that might be new to this podcast or new to us or Michelle or Psychedelics or IFS or anything like that, Derek Scott is the founder of IFS in Canada, IFSCA. He started with doing these YouTube videos of just talking about IFS, and then he would do these videos where he was the client, and then he'd switch into the therapist. And and so when I was new to IFS, that was the first thing I found was sort of these funny, amazing videos that Derek was doing. And so I think I know that he started with the videos, and then that evolved, and that continued to evolve. And he passed away in January of 2024. I'm like, what month is it right now? Was it January?
It was February 18th.
Okay, thank you. February 18th, and it's October right now. And he wrote a book. In like a month, and his book will be out in November, I believe, is the latest we've heard. And so Michelle and Derek talks a lot about psychedelics in the book, and in the conversations he and I had in January. We talked a lot in January, so I think that's why I'm thinking of January. And so Michelle, what do you want to say about Derek and sort of how you met him, and anything that you want to say before we talk about his book?
Well, as you made that pivot to this conversation, I noticed a lot of my parts feeling sad. So I just want to acknowledge that, because that still comes up for my parts, having grief with missing him. And so I'll just take a minute with my parts with that. I can feel my heart beating a little faster. So Derek, I also found him first like 15 years ago with his cute videos. I was like, is he in a sauna? That's, he switches roles between clients and therapists. So I first saw him on that, and I learned more IFS through him. And then I met him at the 2016 conference. He was in a panel, and his daughter Maya was there. And afterwards, I went up and I said, I just have to come say hello and meet you. And from there, it was like connecting on email. And then he invited me to come do my daily parts meditation practice for IFS Canada. And from there, especially I would say after 2020, we connected much more and more frequently in emails and phone calls and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how I came to Derek.
How are you doing right now? Just naming the sadness and remembering and saying that. How are you doing?
Yeah, well, part of what comes up with the sadness, and that really came up in a ketamine journey I had, and I think it was March, was just, we always say this when somebody passes away, that there was just never enough time. And there's a lot of things I wish I could have done with him and collaborated with him. And so that comes up again. And I'm reminded in the journey that Derek said, hey, silly, we can still collaborate. We can still do this. And immediately in that journey after that, or not in the journey after that comment of silly, we can still collaborate, was having a psilocybin retreat for folks who've read his book and who are end of life or have a terminal diagnosis. And it just was like all of a sudden a whole bunch of light came in that journey, and him and I just nodding like, of course, that's a perfect way we could collaborate, even though I'm not down there. But so that's something I'm really hoping to put into action in 2025 once this book is out, and give folks some time to read it and have that. And that feels really exciting for those parts who missed him, because I imagine even more connection with him as I put that together and as it's happening.
But the main thing I hear is, I don't like this. It's a younger part that says, I don't like this. And that was what came up immediately when he told me. So yeah, it was funny yesterday. That was immediately what I was feeling, that like, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. And yeah, I think there's parts of me that are like, okay, what's going to happen in November when, there's more talk about him and the book is out there. And, yeah. And there's something, as you say that, there's something in me that says, then I get to feel closer to him. I get to feel a little bit closer to him. And that always felt good to be a little bit closer to him. Even when he was, sarcastic and a little bit, not harsh, but like, direct or something, that like my system, I wanted to be like, okay, you have to be a little bit like gentler with me. Like I remember one time I was getting glasses, or my glasses broke. And we were texting about the podcast, and he was telling me about people that, I should have on or whatever. So him and I were texting the whole time. I was like at the glass place. And I told him, oh, well, I was hoping to get new glasses. I mean, I've had the same pair of glasses for, I don't know, 20 years or something, because I only wear them like at night, and they broke. And I was like, oh, I was hoping to get new glasses, but they have my frames and that's cheaper. And he was like, don't let your cheap parts make the decision. And I remember being like, oh, okay. But I did let the cheap parts make the decision. But I remember being like, oh, ouch. Like it was a little bit of because I was like, oh, I didn't, like he would just name it. And, and it wasn't like an out, but it was direct. Like it was just direct. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay.
He could definitely do that. Yes.
Yeah. And I guess I'm just noticing that, yeah, this is what people talk about when people die, is that, just these stories that we can share. Like what happens to me, what's happening to me right now is I'm sharing the story, is like, I can feel him, and a little bit more close, and, feel more connected to you and to him. And that feels really nice.
Yeah. I say the same thing. Yeah. It feels like he is near right now.
Yeah. And one of the things that, to circle us back to the psychedelics, one of the things that really did bring him a lot of comfort is that he did psychedelics throughout his life. He talks about this in the book, but he did it at the end of his life and really got some pretty clear, hopeful messages. And I think that was one of the things that I was surprised by with the book, is how, I mean, it was sad and I cried the whole time, but it wasn't like devastating. It was very hopeful. And there was like this hopeful, really spiritual message, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That comes through really clearly in his book. Yeah, I was really grateful that he wanted me to read it in January and provide feedback. But reading through it, even though it is sad, because I mean, the title is dead. Spoiler alert, right? That he's, and in true here.
Derek fashion, there's like a picture of like a coffin, and I'm like, really? He's like, well, it's
with rainbow feet, footprints. It's so sweet. Yeah. What was I going to say about that? That that even though it's sad because he's not here, and there's a lot of deep and sad things as we read through it, there's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of humor, because Derek was had just tremendous amounts of humor. So that's in there. But back to the psychedelics. Yeah, he mentions in there, he came to IFS and psychedelics within the same year. And you get to read, because it's part as the publishers say in the book, it's a very unique book. It's got a couple different genres within it. And in there, he has some journal entries right after some of his psychedelic journeys. And one particular one where he got to unburden this part of him and some legacy burdens. And so you can see, I think readers will see why IFS and psychedelics are so such a good match. And he did a good job of illustrating that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it is a unique book. And I remember thinking like this, I would never read this book if it was, unless it just, because I have parts that are like, I don't like this, right? So I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to do it. But I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it and how creative it was.
Super, super creative. Yes. And, true to Derek's style, at the end, he's got these appendices about what IFS is and some exercises and ways to get to know your system. So
yeah, I mean, he's teaching us till, I think I say that in Michelle and I both do a recommendation. I think I say that like he leaves us as he found us, right? He found us teaching us with YouTube, and he's leaving us the same way by teaching in this book. Just a gifted teacher.
Yes. I think the world was very lucky and still is that he was able to turn in and do his own work to provide us with a lot of beauty and gifts.
Yeah. So let's take a pause and see if there's anything else we want to say about anything.
Because just 2 days ago, the publisher sent me the last proof copy. I got to read a whole new segment that I didn't get to see beforehand, which is the epilogue. And I won't give the spoiler alert to the spoiler alert, but I really hope readers read the epilogue because it's all about his dying weekend. And when I read it, my parts were like, yeah, this is what I've wanted for my own ending. And if I get to be lucky enough to choose, if I'm hit by a bus, of course, and die that way, of course, I can't choose it. But if I am lucky enough to choose how I end, that would have been very much the same way. And so I'm just really grateful that he shares that's shared in the book for folks. And really look forward to that coming out. And I'm grateful to have been one of the forewords in there. And I think it'll be a really wonderful resource for folks.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you and I have each other to support. Let me say this. I'm glad that my parts have you and your friendship just to walk through all the things with, the hard stuff and the fun stuff. And just really appreciate that. Appreciate your friendship.
Same here, Tammy. It's been fun to go through that growth and evolution with you and friendship. I appreciate you. Yeah. And my parts want to say they love your podcast, and I love listening to everyone you have on here. It's just such a wonderful contribution to IFS, much like Derek, just bringing the wealth of wisdom and sharing that with the world. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you left a rating, a review, a like, comment, share with your family, your friends. That would mean so much to me. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or on Amazon. You can visit my website, tammysallenberger.com, or you can download a free Get to Know a Should part of you. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and at The One Inside on Facebook and on YouTube. Jeff Schrum co-produces The One Inside, and I am forever grateful for Jeff. Also thankful for Jack Reardon for creating the music, and just thank you for listening. 6 seasons, over 1 million downloads. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you and this community. I'll see you next time.